Considering the sexy scenes he's read, totally 18 plus. Don't you know who you're talking to?
Daddy. Strength to hold in what is trying to get out. Okay. Temptation.
He lowers himself down between my legs and watches me closely as he pushes himself inside me. I cry out, moaning with pleasure, uncaring how feral and out of control I sound. Kyle moves slowly at first, kissing me so softly that I feel like I might explode. Then he pulls back and slams into me hard.
I shall save you all from spiders. I'm an expert trapper and releaser. That's so sweet that you release them. I murder them.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Apologies for my tardiness in getting started. I was super sidetracked and distracted, but I'm here. Hi. Good to see you. Happy Sunday. It is Sunday, right? Yeah. Pretty sure it's Sunday. Great to see you all. Yes. Yes, indeed. Okay. Let me see what I missed, because I have not kept up with chat. Arachna, hello, hi, welcome in. Lady K, Mama House Gaming. Stunt Mama's Mama. Good to see you all. And Mitchell, of course. Hello, Mitchell. Hi. How the heck are ya? Let's see. Hugs. Hi, hi. How are you? Hello. Tired, but you know, getting things done. I feel ya. Yes. Second anniversary since my husband has been gone. Oh, Mama House Gaming. I am so sorry. That's tough. No matter how you slice it. I'm really sorry. Big hugs for you. I don't know what else to say except we're here for you. If you need anything, just say the word. The word can be banana. How about that? You say banana and we will know. We understand. Okay, but seriously, no, we're here. I'm sorry that that's happened and that, you know, it's just shit. I'll just say that. Right, so the reason I was getting sidetracked, I was in the beginning stages of making a new starting soon video for my buddy Thump Gaming. We've raided him a couple times, and I managed to catch a starting soon screen, and I was like, it's acceptable, but could it be better? Is it enough? You know? So I asked him if I could make one, and he's like, sure. So I did, or I am. So yeah, that's that. In fact, I need to save a couple things so I don't lose where I am, because that could be bad. So let me just save that. And let's put, excuse me, gosh. Let's go ahead and put this here in this. Okay, got it. Hi, I'm back. Yeah, so we have a puzzle. And of course, we're starting a brand new book tonight, so I even dressed for the occasion. I mean, I have this shirt I've worn it before. It has never had a better purpose than for the beginnings of this new book. I mean, come on. It's clock themed. Hello. Winner, winner. Chicken dinner. And of course, I picked a clock themed puzzle for you. Thank you. Thank you. I found this very... Well, I don't even know how you would describe this clock thing. It'll be a challenge. It'll be a challenge, that's for sure. It's less than 500 pieces, though. I think I chose 480 or something to that effect. So, have fun with that for all of you puzzlers out there. But yeah, so this weekend, Friday nights, I don't know what y'all did, but Friday nights I went to a local brewery. A friend of mine had his birthday, so I went there with a whole bunch of other people and we hung out for a while and we had a great time just hanging out, eating some food, having a drink and just chilling, talking shop and whatnot. So that was fun. And then the very next morning I got in my car and I met up with some different friends and we drove to Chicago, where I don't know if any of you have heard about Dude Dad. If that name rings a bell from YouTube and other social media sites. Dude Dad. But he had his very first comedy tour. And so he came to the Chicago area. So we went and saw him live do his thing for the very first time. And so that was really fun. And then we drove back this morning. I slept like poop last night. I was so delusional, okay? I've never had this happen before. I kept waking up like almost on the hour. And I looked over at the clock in my hotel room and I saw that it said like something 42 minutes, like whatever the hour was, and then 42 minutes. And I knew I had set my alarm for 7:45 in the morning because I wanted to get up, get ready, go get some breakfast with the guys, and then we would head out. So I was like, oh, my alarm's going to go off in 3 minutes. I'll just get up and, get going. So I get up, I go turn the light on. I'm starting to get dressed, and I look back at the clock. It was 4:42 a.m. Not 7:42 a.m. I went back to sleep. Woke up again at 5 something, woke up again at 6, and it was just on and on and on. So by the time I got home, I was just like, hi, I'm home. Wife and kid went out. They went to see some gymnastics stuff and went to the library. I took a well-needed nap. I was also sitting next to someone in the theater, very nice theater, by the way, and they were coughing on and off, and I was like, this is awesome. Surrounded by human beings, and the one next to me is the one coughing. So I hadn't been feeling that great when I got home. I was just attributing it to the lack of sleep. But I took some Airborne, as one does. I did wash my hands a lot on this trip, and I cleaned out my nose a lot, because that's where a lot of the bacteria and germs go as you're breathing in. But yeah, fingers crossed it doesn't turn into something else, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah. You hate it when that happens? Yeah. Rampage, what's up, dude? How's life? How's things? You love Airborne? Yep. It works a treat. That's the last thing you need. I know. It's really annoying. This is why I still mask. Absolutely. Hi, Kay. I do have my normal cup of tea because that always feels good. And depending on how I feel after our reading tonight, I may or may not make myself a hot bath and just kind of, you know, sink into that a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I'm not supposed to submerge my tattoo until technically Tuesday, because that is the 2-week mark. So if I do take a bath, I won't submerge my tattoo. I just want to sit in the hot water and just let the body relax a little bit. Because you know when you feel like you're getting sick, your body just kind of freaks out and everything's on overdrive and it's like red alert and the sirens are going off and the red lights are twirling around and your immune system is on mission control.
Let me see what you have.
Let me see what you have. So a hot bath might help. Chillin', just hosted some family for dinner and getting ready to relax. Well, you came to the right place, man. We're gonna start our book here soon. Brand new book tonight.
I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better. I am better.
Thank you for that, Redeem. I don't think 2 days is going to kill you if you do decide. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. I assumed the 14-day rule is just kind of a safety parameter, you know? Like, kind of a cushioned, just to be sure kind of thing. So, we'll see. Either way, I still won't submerge it just to be safe, but I just need the helpful effects of a hot, all-consuming bathtub. Anyway, you like that, Rampage? Yeah, you probably haven't seen it yet, so glad you could. That's so badass. Thank you. It hurt a lot when I got it, so. It's kind of one of those things where it better be worth it, because A, it's permanent, and it hurt, so. But I love it, so I'm very glad I decided to do it. I never, ever thought I would be one of those people that would get a tattoo. Not because I'm against them, because I'm obviously not. I'm so pasty, I never really take my shirt off, because I've got the traditional dad bod going on. But, you know, on the arm, works perfect. I have 2, and I have plans for 13 more. I don't have any plans for anything else right now. Oops, smacking my mouse. Sorry, I just had to send a quick message. Okay. Delicious. That tea, it just hits the right spots. You know what I mean? Spicy. All right. It's time to get into a book. What would you do if you can go back in time and change your life? Which mistakes and regrets would you fix? In future-proof an experimental medical procedure goes awry and allows Sam Harris to do exactly that. He starts by standing up to the kids who bullied him at school, and then sets about trying to fix the mess he made for the rest of his life. However, he soon discovers that changing his past doesn't always lead to a brighter future. I have not cracked open this book. As you can see, it's still very fresh, but we're going to crack it open right now. So let's get to it. The sands of time. Oh, you'll also notice over here in the corner, I changed my redeems. Push-ups are still based off of subs, but I've changed the bits to curls. So every 100 bits is 2 curls, basically 1 for each arm. And of course, the giveaway, which is above my head, is still happening. We're very close. 35 out of 50, so we're only 15 away, because I can math. Who wrote that? It's written by a gentleman named David Atkinson. No relation. Alright, here we go. The very front, the very first page. A time travel comedy drama with an original musical soundtrack. The songs can be accessed via the Collective Charm Records YouTube page or by accessing all the usual streaming platforms by searching for Future Proof the Album by Memorine. We'll have to check that out at some point. Actually, I might check that out before the next stream, and I'll see if it's the kind of music that would fit for what we do here. Maybe it could be our tunes in the background. We'll have to see. We don't have a table of contents, which I'd like to have for the simple sake of knowing how many pages it's going to be till the next chapter. But it doesn't take much for me to flick through and just kind of take a look without ruining any of the story and seeing something I didn't want to see, etc., etc. But yeah, there's no table of contents. In the back, we have some author notes, and that's it. There's a background to the story, there's the music stuff, there's author notes, and let me just see if I can find... There are 39 chapters in this book. So, without further ado, we're going to get on with Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Running Rings, okay? We're on page 2 in this printed copy, !future, if you want to check out our author, this book, and others. But for now, sit back, relax, and I'll read you a story. Like most afternoons, I'm slumped on the couch watching TV, the floor around me littered with empty crisp packets. Oh, by the way, this is a British author, so if anyone needs translation of, like, crisps, which are, in the USA, chips, you just let me know. The floor around me littered with empty crisp packets and scrunched up Coke cans. The girl on TV is singing a track called Running Rings, and I turn up the volume to try and drown out the yells and thumps on my front door. From where I'm sat, I can see it vibrating in its frame. I return my attention to the TV and notice the singer strobing in and out of focus. This might be an intended special effect, or the result of me dropping the TV last week. Probably the latter. The door frame and surrounding wood groaned, splintered, and collapsed onto the floor, along with the door itself, and in they charged. 4 huge, human Rottweilers wearing identical jeans and trainers, the uniform of bailiffs. They paused wide-eyed, surveying the battleground, adrenaline pumping, ready for action. The scene reminded me of an American cop show. However, instead of brandishing guns and pepper spray, these guys were armed with more sinister weapons. Repossession paperwork, a court summons, and an eviction order. They dropped the documentation onto my lap and set about ransacking my home, accompanied by the TV soundtrack. They opened drawers, pulled up carpets, and generally dismantled the place. My appointed social worker, Sally Henderson, crept through the carnage behind them. I'm unsure who appointed her, but she said she'd been appointed, and I didn't dispute it. I watched the 40-inch TV being transported out of my flat and down the stairs. It wouldn't go very far towards repaying what I owed everyone. It wasn't worth much to begin with. Less since I dropped it. I felt curiously remote, detached, viewing everything from a distance, semi-invisible to the bailiffs, semi-invisible to the world, semi-invisible to myself. I wondered why televisions were still measured in inches. Televisions and penises seemed to be still subject to the imperial measurement scale. I couldn't think of anything else. 1 inch of TV screen for each year of my life. Sally sat down on the couch, as far away from me as she could, pushing against the armrest. I should have mentioned that it was only being held in place by the fabric. A second later, Sally disappeared. She'd plunged to the floor and landed on her ample bottom amongst the empty crisp packets and Coke cans. Her dark brown hair fell forward over her face. The situation seemed comic, but I had no urge to laugh. Extracting any humor from my predicament seemed inappropriate. Plus, laughing took effort. I lacked the energy. Sally righted herself and perched on the edge of the now armless sofa. She is dark-haired and serious, with a soft South London accent and nice teeth. She sighed and began to speak. Sam, I'm sorry it's eventually come to this, but I can't help you if you won't help yourself. I'd become used to her tone of voice, pitched somewhere between nursery and year 1 level, with a healthy dose of exasperation. However, her heart must have been in the right place for her to be spending time with the utterly useless like me. I nodded, which seemed to encourage her to continue. You've got 24 hours to get out of here. The landlord's been more than reasonable, Sam. He's not had a rent payment from you in 6 months. I nodded again. It felt like the right thing to do, as I couldn't disagree with a word she'd said. She stared at a piece of paper for a moment, then looked up and made eye contact with me. If you remember, I got you to provide a sample of your DNA a week or so back? I had wondered about that, but other more critical issues had been at the forefront of my mind. Eviction letters and a perpetually empty fridge. Well, she continued, based on the DNA test results, I've managed to secure a care-assisted place for you in a residential facility. There are some conditions. There are always conditions. With everything in life, I'd discovered. I couldn't say I'd missed the little flat. I'd been here just over a year, lured to Birmingham with the promise of a call center job that lasted less than 3 months. Sally elaborated. It's a mental health unit. Technically, you don't meet the criteria because you are more than capable of looking after yourself if you want to. But it seems your DNA sample means you are a perfect fit for a study they are conducting. You'll get to stay there only if you agree to participate in the project. It's scheduled to last for 6 to 8 weeks, and during that time, they'll try to improve your self-esteem and overall mental health. The unit, called Perry Flowers is in the north of the city. It might be just what you need. I wondered why a mental health unit would be named after something that sounded more like a florist. Perhaps that was the reason, to make it sound less like its actual purpose and to make you think it smelled nice. Maybe it did. I think that had been the longest I'd heard my social worker speak in the 2 months I'd known her. I nodded. I didn't have much to say about anything anymore. Had I given up? Maybe. I remained self-aware enough to know I'd been on a slippery slope for some time, but discovered I lacked the motivation to do much about it. I'd accepted my situation. A consequence of making bad decisions. The weird thing I'd found is that one wrong decision tended to lead me to the next one. I liken it to an addicted gambler who thinks the next big bet will pay off and return them to parity. It never does, of course, and another lousy decision inevitably leads to a similar outcome. Perhaps I'd become addicted to bad decisions. It would explain a lot. I considered trying to explain this to Sally, but decided it would take too much effort. I watched as she assessed the increasingly stark room. Where will you sit? I didn't know. The floor, maybe? The bulky men removed the bed. It had been part of the furniture when I'd moved in. They were zealous, these bailiffs, devoted to their craft. I'm not sure the landlord would agree. Sally watched as they squeezed the bed through the broken door frame, plaster dislodged, and drizzled to the floor. We both stared at the little powdery waterfall until it ceased. Where will you sleep? She asked as the bed disappeared down the stairs. I had no idea. Sitting alone in my flat for the last few days, dreading this moment, had rendered me temporarily mute. I hadn't had anyone to speak to except Monty, my life-sized, fluffy Shetland pony replica. He didn't answer back. His best feature. They took him next. His glassy-eyed stare regarded me accusingly as they maneuvered him through the broken doorway. I'd won him at a works raffle during my first week at the call center. My supervisor, Katie, wanted him for her 2 young kids, but I'd taken him home. I'd never won anything else in my entire life. We'd enjoyed some interesting conversations over the preceding months, usually after I'd had a few beers. Monty wasn't much of a drinker. A good listener, though. Non-judgmental and patient. I considered asking Sally if she wanted him, but decided that trying to wrestle him back from the burly bailiff would end up in physical pain, so I didn't bother. My social worker made a note and announced, "This place is no longer secure. Burglars could waltz straight in." I sighed, thinking they'd probably waltz straight back out again seconds later. "Get your things together, Sam. We need to find somewhere for you to sleep until tomorrow." I duly obeyed, which took all of 5 seconds. I had a rucksack ready to go. My life in a 20 by 14-inch bag. Half the width of the TV. Sally walked with me downstairs and plinked her car key. The boot to her old Mazda 3 flipped open. She regarded me momentarily, then said, "Okay, put your stuff in the boot and get in. But no funny business." I nodded, not 100% sure what she meant by funny business. I assume she didn't expect me to make jokes. I'd long ago lost my jolly disposition. I dumped the rucksack, then represented the remains of my life in the boot and sat in the passenger seat. I noted the empty crisp packets and Coke cans on the floor, a half-eaten donut, and the coffee mug with lipstick around the rim. We had something in common, after all. I felt quite at home as my trainer shuffled amongst the detritus. I can read. Outside, Sally talked on her phone to someone, perhaps telling them she'd be taking me in her car in case I decided to try my best Peter Kay car share impersonation while she drove. She terminated the call, clambered in, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. I glanced back at the entrance to my building and noted the Rottweilers coming out of the door with rolled-up carpets over their shoulders. They were there when I moved in too. Zealous. And that is chapter 1. So, basically, we've got, itchy tattoo, that's what we've got. We've got a guy who's basically given up on life and knew that this day was going to come. We know he's made some bad decisions because he told us. We don't know yet what those decisions are. And all of his stuff is being taken away. Well, I guess it wasn't even really his. But if they're going to evict him, why not just leave the landlord's stuff in the apartment? Right? Unless it's just too abused and it needs to be ridden, trashed. I don't know. I don't know how it sounds to you all, but does my voice seem a little bit deeper than usual? It feels that way. Why do I have a message from Amazon? The heck? I'll be arriving with your delivery soon. Please secure pets if you have them and turn on a light if it's dark. Thanks. Okay. Interesting. Never had that before. I will let my wife know. Yes, maybe a touch. Okay. Is it too much, or does everything still come across as okay? So I can alter my settings if needed. I almost spat out my tea. Still sexy. Thank you very much. Sounds good to me? Alright. Mitchell, that was not the answer I was expecting. You're funny. Alright. We're on chapter 2, because that's what happens when you finish chapter 1. And I need to put up my other screen so I can keep an eye on stuff. Okay. Chapter 2 is called November Rain. Excuse me. We're on page 8 in this here printed version. Now, interestingly about this book, there is an audiobook version already available. There's the doorbell and the dog, letting me know that Amazon is here. Amazon never rings the doorbell. It's very strange. Anyway, The reason I mentioned that there's an audiobook is because usually when there's an audiobook, there's usually some kind of like, no, you can't read it aloud like a live audiobook because someone already did it as an audiobook. But I guess it's okay. Sure hope so. I do have permission to read it. I just want to point that out. I've been in communication with the author through email. Okay. Getting that out of the way. Chapter 2, page 8, November Rain. We drove across Britain's second city. Much of it remained a mystery to me. A year doesn't allow you to know a place, especially when you've spent most of it hiding from creditors in a small flat. I guess I could have taken a trip on one of the tour buses and introduce you to the landmarks and history, or that introduce you, but I hadn't. Sally informed me that she'd persuaded Perry Flowers' mental health unit to take me a day early. That explained the phone call. Eventually, we turned off the main road into a small car park. The unit consisted of low-rise buildings arranged in a series of rectangular blocks. Small flower beds were placed underneath every second window. It being November, only the memory of summer remained as brown stalks and dead leaves rustled and shivered in the cold breeze. Sally selected a parking space near the entrance and turned off the engine. She lifted a large leather bag onto her lap. I noticed a dark, oily stain on the bottom right-hand corner. Something was leaking. She extracted a fistful of paperwork and handed me the top sheet to read. This is a summary of the placement. Much of the detail is unimportant. You need to participate fully, or they will find someone else. I scanned the page, which consisted of a list of provisions and rules. I would be provided with a single room and 3 meals a day. I had to keep the room tidy, and whilst there were no specified restrictions on my freedom in terms of where I could go, I would be required to sign in and out, and overnight absences needed to be sanctioned beforehand by the project leader. It felt a little oppressive, but I'd guess I'd run out of alternatives. We exited the car and pushed our way through the heavy glass doors. Inside seemed light and pleasant. My views of such establishments had been formed from movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Terminator 2. I wondered why the project was interested in me. I wasn't an unusual case, I didn't think. Plus, I doubted that a few weeks of therapy would undo what a lifetime of poor decisions and recklessness had accumulated. Still, I'd run out of options. My next stop after this would be homelessness or death. The former scared me more than the latter. There had been moments in the last few years when I'd have welcomed oblivion. I had contemplated ending it all on several occasions. One cold, wet evening last March, I'd sat on the precipice of a railway bridge, legs dangling in thin air, waiting for an express train to come along. Of course, it turned out to be the evening that all the train services had been cancelled due to industrial action. You couldn't depend on anything anymore. Looking back, it wouldn't have been fair on the poor driver, but I hadn't been thinking too clearly at the time. I realized that contemplating suicide might be considered a valid reason for seeking mental health assistance, even more so than talking to a stuffed pony, perhaps. After Sally had completed the paperwork for me, she said, "I'll stop by every so often to see how things are going." She picked up her bag, walked a few feet, then stopped and turned. "Sam, this is probably your last chance. If you think you realize that, or I think you realize that, but just in case, please don't blow it." She stared at me for a moment, like she was about to say something else, but then decided against it and left. The pretty girl behind the reception desk led me to a small room reminiscent of a budget hotel. TV on the wall, a small shower room, and a bedside table with a drawer. I opened it, but no Bible. Fine by me. I wasn't seeking divine intervention. The unit certainly didn't have the feel of the Jack Nicholson film, nor did it appear that I would be tied to a bed like Linda Hamilton, waiting for an orderly to lick her face. But I remained wary. I'm starting to move letters around. It's totally fine. The door had no lock that I could see, and the other people wandering around seemed relatively lucid and normal. I showered, shaved, and generally tried to make myself presentable. The problem with being presentable is that it reminded me of a life where I once functioned normally, holding down a job, socializing, and even being married. Being stinky and dirty presented a barrier to the world, a barrier against conversation and expectation. When you're scruffy and unwashed, people don't ask you to do anything. Being scrubbed up might mean whoever's dealing with me may have high ideals of what I might achieve. They'd almost certainly end up disappointed. The unit, or perhaps clinic was a better description, had been arranged as a series of interconnected low-rise buildings with corridors between them. Most were single-story, but the furthest away, 2 blocks, had a lower level. Mad Locust, what's up? Welcome into your evening snooze read. I hope you're able to drift off to sleep. The single glazed glass in the corridor windows failed to insulate the space properly, and I noticed a distinct chill when crossing from reception to the accommodation block. The buildings were set out in large rectangles, which, in theory, should have made it difficult to lose your bearings, as you'd keep walking and eventually end up back where you started. But knowing me, I'd get lost. As instructed, I returned to the reception after half an hour to find Nurse Peyton, name badge, waiting for me. She sat me in a chair and took some vials of blood, which I assumed was a backup to the DNA samples already provided, but she might be testing for rabies, COVID, green monkey disease, or Ebola, for all I knew. Later that evening, Dr. Linda Jaeger, the chief psychiatrist in charge of the project, as she called it, joined us all for dinner. She nibbled on a salad, no doubt making mental notes about our behavior and social interactions. There were 8 women and 4 men, including me. The full extent of the Perry Flowers patients. Perry Flowers patients. I feel like I have to practice that. Perry Flowers patients. All the I seem to have been the last one to arrive. We'd all been given name badges, first names only, with instructions that they had to be worn at all times. Molly was sitting opposite me. She had dirty blonde hair, green eyes, and a welcoming smile. When she smiled, she kept her head lowered most of the time, picking at her nails and avoiding eye contact. Apart from her tendency to drift, she seemed perfectly normal. Unlike poor Ted, who sat 2 chairs down from me. He shook his head constantly and muttered, "Charles Darwin." Occasionally, he'd get annoyed with himself about something and slap the side of his head with the palm of his hand. As he shook or smacked his head, a cloud of dandruff blizzarded down, coating his tomato soup in crispy flakes. Ugh. That's a visual I did not need. Moving on. His scalp storm contaminated a fellow patient. Amanda's soup, too. She pushed it away and berated Ted. Ted paid her no heed, so he turned to Dr. Jaeger. Why is it my turn to sit beside... Or wait. Hold on. Oh, so she turned. I read it wrong. I thought it said so he turned. So she turned to Dr. Jaeger. Why is it my turn to sit beside Flaky Head again? I sat here yesterday. It's disgusting. Amanda, I estimated to be in her early 40s with dark hair, gray roots, and sad eyes. Her life hadn't gone to plan either. Glancing around the table, that might apply to all of us. Otherwise, why would we be here? Angus, the youngest, late teens, maybe early 20s, had his eye on Molly and stared at her constantly. Molly didn't seem to notice, or perhaps pretty women over time just became immune to being stared at. Despite being the last to arrive, I couldn't see that any meaningful friendships had developed aside from Angus's obvious crush on Molly. Flakehead? Yeah. I'm fine. However, with the doc, as I decided to call her, watching, maybe they were nervous. It had been a long time since I'd shared a dinner table with anyone, let alone 12 strangers. I felt self-conscious eating soup, being careful not to slurp or drip. Of course, I failed miserably at both and managed to drip tomato soup all over the crotch area of my clean joggers. Later, I added some gravy to the mess from the main course of roast beef, potatoes, and veg. That sounds delicious. After dinner, everyone dispersed either to their rooms or the recreation area. This consisted of a large room at the back. It housed a full-size snooker table, 2 table tennis tables, a pool table, pinball machines, and a massive HD TV. A door opened onto the gardens, but no one would venture out there tonight, it being dark, cold, and raining. I decided to retire early to my room, partly due to not being comfortable with people and partly down to the red/brown mess all over my joggers. Dr. Jaeger, however, had other ideas and intercepted me at reception. She'd invited me into her office for a chat. Not something you turn down, I assumed, regardless of the mess of one's trousers. She sat on a chair at the side of her desk, a ploy, I imagined, to prevent the desk from becoming a barrier between us. She flipped through a thick folder, which probably contained details about me and my history. The doc was attractive. She reminded me of a Susanna Reid from Good Morning Britain, a more serious version. I placed my hands on my lap to try and conceal the mess. After a moment or two of reading, she looked up and smiled. "You never said a word during dinner." I pondered her statement momentarily before answering. I'm not a great conversationalist. She smiled again. You can speak then. That's a relief. I had begun to suspect you might be a mute. Her idea of a joke. I smiled as I suspected that was what she wanted me to do. I don't have much to say for myself these days. But once upon a time, you did? I shrugged. She put my file down on her desk. We'll start properly tomorrow, but I just wanted to check you're okay. It must feel strange coming here. Not something you thought would ever happen to you. Thanks. She regarded me, trying to suss me out, I assumed. I noticed her wedding ring. I wonder what it must be like being married to a psychiatrist. Did she constantly analyze her husband's behavior, hoping to spot the telltale signs in case he went psycho on her and had been unfaithful? Of course, I'd made assumptions here. She might be married to another woman for all I knew. Dismissed, I retired to my room and flipped on the TV. I channel surfed for a while and settled onto an episode of Friends until I felt my eyes closing. I cleaned my teeth, clambered into bed, and slipped away. Early the following morning, a blaring alarm woke me, the rest of the residents, and probably any dead people in graves within a 2-mile radius. I had been warned about it, but the loud shrillness seemed unnecessary. What? Zarias, my dude. Thank you so much for the resub. Where's my pen? Here it is. Thank you so much. You get your name in the drawing. How are you, sir? Look at that. I even spelled it right. Let me just fold this up. Thank you again. Super kind of you. Fantastic. Awesome. We like fantastic. That's a great thing. I'm doing pretty good. Thank you. I'm a little tired from this weekend, but yeah. I'm good. Let's see. So let's get our push-ups to 5 and 36 on the subs. Awesome. And yes, the puzzle is here. It's, well, you'll see. It's a lovely little clock for our theme for this book, Future Proof. So welcome in. We're getting very close to finishing chapter 2. Now, Zarias, real quick. I know that you and your brothers are kind of combining all of your Twitch channels into one. Does this mean you're going to be like more active in that? Or is it still going to be mainly Rhino and Super? Just curious. I haven't seen you like hardly ever at all on stream, so just checking. That's the hope. My solo channel will still be around, but I'm waiting to get more involved. Cool. All right. Awesome. So yes, newsflash for those of you that don't know, Zarias, Rhino, and Super, they're all brothers. They have an official combined Twitch channel, or it will be shortly. And they're kind of pooling everything together and just using that account between the three of them. So it's gonna be great. Can't wait. Right. Shrill sound, waking up the dead. Okay. I checked my watch. 7:15 a.m. Early, but not stupidly early. I showered, dressed, and joined my colleagues for breakfast. Would colleagues be an appropriate term? Prisoners seem severe, patients too clinical, and victims a little dramatic. Colleagues would do. Breakfast consisted of a buffet of cereals and either toast or croissants. I skipped the healthy options, spread a croissant with butter and jam, and washed it down with a coffee. Nurse Peyton appeared and instructed everyone to check the roster at reception. I'd been sitting beside Angus. It had been the only chair left. He didn't seem very talkative, which suited me. I finished my breakfast and pottered through to reception, where a large whiteboard had been placed in front of the reception desk. I found my name second from the top. Sam Harris, room 12, 8:30 a.m., Dr. Janice Ramos. The clock on the reception wall stated 8:25. I searched for room 12, deciding I shouldn't be late on my first morning. I found it tucked away at the end of a corridor. I knocked quietly, and a warm female voice said, "Come in." I pushed open the door and discovered a vision in a white coat. And that's chapter 2. So, our character, Sam Harris, is in some sort of institution, for lack of better terms. I was just calm down. It's just taking the lid off. See? It has this little lid to help keep it warmer for longer. Plus I have the warming plates thing as well. We normally drink skim milk, but every time I'm at a restaurant or a hotel, if you want milk, it's 2%. Like, for some reason, that's just what they have. And I used to drink 2%, like, all the time. So I decided at home we would still have our gallon of skim, but I got myself a half gallon of 2%, and I used it in my tea, and it makes all the difference. That little extra creaminess goes a long way. Exactly. Look at you Americans using gallons and such. Whole milk in my coffee always. I don't know if I'm sure I've had whole milk at some point, but I don't remember when. Stump Mama's mama. Well, yeah. Like, duh. I'm a half and half kind of girl. Well, that's okay. You know what? There's a lot of options out there, which is great. You know, that way everyone can find their thing, and we can all be happy about it. Cream gets too much and 2% is not enough for me, but I still like it. And then Kay has a sugar-free coffee mate. Wow, just all the extremes. Who knew milk would be such a hot topic? I love it. But the 0.1% is just 10% milk and 90% water. What a ripoff, right? Yeah, I tried doing 1% for a while and it just didn't feel right. So it's like you either skim or 2, in my opinion. The 1% just doesn't Doesn't quite get me there. Alright. We're on page 16. I forgot to tell you how many pages the book is, which I don't think I learned from myself either. It looks like 313 pages for this book. And he hasn't wasted any space either. Everything's nice and tight. So it's always interesting to see how folks put their books together and the spacing. Like Kay, yours for example, has much more breathing room, if you will. And I think when I've made my books, I've opted for that kind of position as well. But this one is nice and tight as well, or instead. So yeah, it's just curious how it's all done differently. Anywho. Chapter 3, page 16. This one's called Another Brick in the Wall. All in all, you're just another brick in the wall. Deb handles my formatting. I'm trying really hard not to use an inappropriate joke right there. Spicy. If it's too cramped, it can get hard on the eyes. Gotta have some breathing room, in my opinion. Yeah, this one's not too bad. It's not like, it's just blocks and blocks and blocks of text. Everything's paragraphed nicely. You do not want to get me started. Don't I? Just kidding. Alright, back to the book. Come on, focus. Pay attention. Jeez. Chapter 3. Here we go. Even in my current reduced state, I could tell she was exceptional. She flashed me a smile, probably trying to put me at ease, but it had the opposite effect. I perched on the only other chair in the room, positioned on the opposite side of the small table that separated us, and fidgeted nervously. Dark hair, caramel skin, and impossibly exotic. She must be used to having this effect on men and some women, I imagined. She went about her business as if my nervous reaction to her hadn't occurred. Sam, as you will have gathered from the notice board, I'm Dr. Ramos. But for our session today, I'd prefer if you would just call me Janice. Can you manage that? I nodded. Good. Another smile. I also need you to relax. Will you be able to do that? I smiled and shook my head. Probably not. She nodded and said, I can understand while you're nervous. This is your first time receiving any kind of therapy, isn't it? Yes. Today, we'll not be doing anything taxing. I just need to ask you questions. All I ask is that you answer them as honestly as you can. Okay? I nodded. Right. Let's get started. She flipped open a folder with many printed pages and, from what I could read upside down, a list of questions. We'll stop frequently for breaks, don't worry. I'll start with some general questions. What do you understand by the term mental health? This would be a long morning. I don't know, really, I muttered, examining my fingernails. I suppose for me it's about being happy. I've never really been happy. She made a note. When was the last time you felt content? Good question. Maybe as a kid? I'm not sure. She nodded and chewed on the end of her pen for a moment before saying, there are many incidents in life that can affect our mental development. Childhood trauma, bereavement, redundancy, relationship breakdowns. Nearly everyone will experience at least some of these in their lives. Many develop coping mechanisms and muddle through. Some of us don't. And that is partly what gives us rise to anxiety and stress. Not the situations we find ourselves in, but our inability to cope with them. Does this sound like you? I guess. I also make bad decisions. Why? I wish I knew. She paused, made a few notes, and then asked, how would you describe your relationship with your parents? Okay. Was there much conflict? No more than any other kid, I suppose. My dad worked a lot on the oil rigs. My mum kept me around for company. When do you first remember being unhappy? I sighed. Would dragging up old memories do me any good? I supposed, given my predicament, it couldn't make things any worse. I got bullied. When? Constantly. Well, that's how it feels. Suddenly conscious that I'd used present tense, I checked if Little Miss Gorgeous had observed the change. Tell me about it. I groaned. Before I went to school, I didn't have much contact with other kids. I didn't go to nursery or play groups or anything. I don't remember that. But my mum told me. As I said, she liked having me around. When I started school, I didn't know what kids were like. I felt like I was playing catch-up. Everyone else had learned to play, stick up for themselves, react or whatever. I stuck out. Awkward, uncomfortable, different. Janice made notes, and I talked more than I'd talked for years. I suppose that made me a target. One kid, Joseph Kennedy, picked on me. I stopped. I felt a stab of pain, a physical ache inside at remembering the little shit. What I wouldn't give to go back and clout the little bugger a few times. I felt angry now, angry at myself for being weak, mad at my mum for making me stand out, and angry with the school for not intervening. Janice sensed my reticence. Please continue, Sam. I can see this is painful, but ultimately this will help us to help you. What did I have to lose? Every morning at break time and occasionally at lunchtime, he'd come looking for me. I'd been in year 1 and he was in year 2. I know that doesn't sound much of a difference, but it is when you're that young. Plus, I'd been small for my age, and he'd been huge, or at least he felt huge to me. He used to kick me, mainly on the shins. Occasionally he'd slap me, but nobody ever intervened. His focus was this dark-haired girl in my class, Lucy Lawrence, whose mum had become friendly with my mum at the school gates. Lucy's mum was Spanish and had been abandoned by her husband when Lucy was small. She didn't know many people, and my mum took her under her wing for a while. In any event, we used to be around each other's houses playing. I'm not sure Joseph had, at that age, any idea about girls and boys and stuff. He just needed an excuse to hit me. But it felt like being punished for something my mum had done. It just wasn't fair. I couldn't have avoided Lucy even if I'd wanted to. I paused, gathered my thoughts. He probably knew that. It gave him the excuse he needed if he needed one. He'd approach me and say, "You've been playing with Lucy again. I've told you about that." Then I'd get kicked, punched, or pushed to the ground. Other kids just stood and watched. I was their entertainment. They'd stop what they were doing, football, running, or whatever, and they'd all gather around for Bash Sam time. Janice looked up from her papers. "Is that what they called it?" I nodded. The physical thing hurt, but the mental torture, if anything, felt worse. He turned people against me. I'm not sure how he did it, manipulative little sod. But I never got picked by the other kids to play football or any other stuff, which is so important at that age. It always felt like I was being on the outside looking in. Maybe he threatened them. I don't know. "You felt excluded," Janice clarified. "I was excluded," I replied. "How long did it continue?" I tried to remember. 6 months, or maybe a little more. I used to come home and tell my pet dog, Benji, all about it. He'd sit in my bed and listen to me as the tears streamed down my face. I loved that dog. "What about your parents? Did you tell them?" I shook my head. They found out eventually. Lucy told her mum, who told my mum, who told my dad. He just said, "Toughen up, you stupid sod." It was like a personal insult to him that his son had become a victim. You need to remember my dad was a tough-skinned oil rigger, a man's man. I'd never had that kind of protective shell. "What about your mum?" "She went along with my dad and encouraged me to come home at lunchtime, but it didn't help. It stopped eventually, but not for months." "How did it end?" I winced, but no point in stopping now. After lunch one day, Joseph and two of his sidekicks, Derek and Freddie, cornered me in the boys' toilets. Occasionally, Joseph drafted them in to help pummel me or hold me while he did it. Anyway, this one afternoon, they all thought it would be hilarious to pull out their cocks and piss all over me. I could feel the tears that's not text, sorry. I could feel the tears pricking at the corner of my eyes as I told my story. The first time I'd even thought about it in any detail for what must be 35 years. Janice stopped scribbling and peered at me. Pity in her eyes. A look I'd seen directed towards me a lot over the years. "How old were these children again?" I sighed. 6, maybe 7. At that age, it's unlikely they developed sociopathic tendencies. Perhaps they were acting out what they saw at home. I snorted. "You really think Joseph Kennedy went home and watched his parents pee on each other?" She smiled. "I'd hope not. but I'm assuming this home life must have been far from nurturing. To exhibit that kind of behavior at such an early age is unusual. I tried to process that. I remembered returning to class soaked in and stinking of urine and bawling my eyes out. The school had to take some action, and the ineffectual headmistress, Arlene Brock, invited all the parents involved in the incident, as she labeled it, to a meeting after school. Only my mum attended, as my dad was offshore. He always seemed to be offshore when something important happened. Kennedy and his cohorts were forced to apologize, but didn't mean it or care. I remember thinking as they shuffled their feet and kept their eyes on the floor. Kennedy's dad tried to play the whole thing down, claiming his son and the others had been trying to see who could pee up the wall the highest, and I'd just gotten in the way. Arlene Brock grabbed onto his explanation and held on for dear life, as any other option would have meant she'd have to take some action. Schools today are more switched on, but I'm sure there are still plenty of evil little ghouls inflicting misery and pain on other kids. I imagine much of it had moved online now, hidden, insidious. Deprived of his immediate object of gratifying abuse, Kennedy redirected his attention elsewhere. Did the bullying stop after that horrible incident? Janice asked, pulling me from my dark thoughts. I nodded. Kind of. I still felt excluded from things by his manipulation, but I'd learned to live with that. In terms of direct bullying, he just moved on to someone else. Janice closed her folder. I think that's enough for this morning, Sam. Thank you. She smiled again. Another pity smile. What else should I expect? I stood and left, returned to my room, made coffee, and cried a little. I hadn't fully realized how much Kennedy had hurt me all those years ago. I hated myself. A fat, blubbering coward whose life had spiraled downwards in an unending whirlpool of excrement. And that's the end to a very sad chapter 3. Lovely. Gosh, it does make you think about school as a young kid, doesn't it? I can't say I was peed on, thank God, but I definitely had my fair share of bullying. That's no doubt. I was the kid in school that liked to do what he was told, move on, get my work done, get my homework done, and just kind of be invisible. That changed, though, once I realized how much I enjoyed the drums and music in that regard. And then I opened up a lot more and became much more confident in myself. Even the bullying, I remember this one guy, what the heck was his name? I can see his face. I don't know. I can see his face. I don't remember his name. It doesn't really matter. He was an idiot. I remember I was walking by a building and he came up running behind me and tried to put me in a headlock. But I had ducked down just at the right time. So instead of getting me in a headlock, he just fell to the floor. And then I just laughed and kept going. That was a fun moment for me. There weren't too many of those fun moments, but Yeah. School kind of sucked. It really did. It got better once I moved to the States and I had to do a year of high school here, even though I should have been technically done. But school in the UK was just miserable. Same, I was extremely shy and was bullied for my hair, my weight, my glasses. Anything they could turn against me. Ugh. Sheesh. That sucks, Kay. I'm sorry. I was always told that they're doing it because they're jealous or whatever their situation is, it's worse for them, so they're taking it out on me. And I believed it for a fraction of whatever its weight was, you know? Like, it may have been 100% true, but I don't know. I only believed it a little bit. Celebrate the small wins, right? I was standing up against the wall when one bully was trying to punch me. Then I moved my head and he slammed his fist into the wall. Ouch. Good move, though. Well done. Meh, they all look way older than me now, so karma. Good on you, Kay. Damn right. Let's see. Ah, chapter 4 is not that long. It's only a few pages. Shall we continue? You know, when I get books, and you know my policy, I don't read ahead. I have no idea what's going to happen. Only the back cover is what I learn. I never know what I'm going to get into. And this book has started out very interestingly, especially from what we left off from your book, Kay. So I knew it was going to be like a kind of a 180 flip the script kind of thing. But I'm kind of getting into it, you know, the more that we uncover. We haven't gotten to the whole go back in time part yet, but it's coming. It's coming. Speaking of which, chapter 4, which is page 23. It's good, very, very well written. Yeah, it does seem to be very well written. Chapter 4 is called Bad Medicine. So we'll see what that's about. Alright. Here we go. After lunch, the whiteboard had been updated and I'd been scheduled for a session with the project leader, Dr. Jaeger herself, in Collis Lab 4. Sounds like a Bon Jovi song. Bad medicine. I had no idea what that meant, but Molly told me to go through the games room, as she called it, along the corridor, down a flight of stairs, and the Collis labs were at the bottom, in the lower level. I didn't know what Collis meant. This is C-H-O-L-I-S, by the way. I'm assuming it's pronounced Collis, but maybe it's Chalice, I don't know. But no doubt, I'd find out at some point. I found Dr. Jaeger waiting for me when I arrived and took in the surroundings. Collis Lab 4 didn't resemble any lab I'd seen in at school, or any that I'd seen on TV. There were no test tubes brewing mysterious green concoctions, no huge banks or fridges to keep cool whatever labs needed to keep cool, and no huge coiled springs connected to cables waiting for a lightning strike. I'd probably watched too many old horror films for my own good. The only difference I could see from the room in which I'd met with Janice was that this one contained a hospital bed with white sheets, 2 pillows, and an extra staff member. The doc said, "Relax, Sam. There's nothing to fear. Before we start, can you step on the scales for me, as we need to make a few calculations?" I cringed. I hated weighing myself. I'd piled on so much fat over the years that I never bothered anymore. What's the point if you had no intention of doing anything about it? Yeah, you're not wrong, Sam, I guess. I stepped on the scales. The digital readout said 118.7 kilos. Kilos were fine. I had no idea what that translated to into stones and pounds. I think if I remember correctly, 1 stone is 14 pounds, I think. If anyone feels so inclined, feel free to translate in Google 118.7 kilos so we can find out what that means in American terms. If you want. The doc made some notes but remained quiet. No fat shaming here. "Can you lie on the bed for me now?" she asked. I complied and watched as she scanned her notes. From my higher vantage point, I could see the notes were Janice's from the morning session. She hadn't mentioned that they'd be shared, but I suppose I should have known that would happen. So that's 18 stones, or 18.6. So you're looking at, let's see, it'd be 140 pounds for 10. 261 pounds. Yeah, I was just going to say I was going to say close to 250, but yeah, 261. Okay, that gives us an idea. Thank you. Good job, chat. Did you attend university, Sam? No. My mum died just after I'd turned 18. And I just didn't. Dr. Jaeger considered my statement. We'll probably spot that later. Spot what later? Good question. Dr. Jaeger closed the folder and asked, "Have you heard of epigenetic regression?" I searched my memory. Nope. Sounds like something they might try to do on Star Trek. The doc laughed. A raucous, deep laugh, not what I'd expected. She nodded. You're not too off the mark there, Sam. It's certainly experimental. Let me explain as best as I can. If I drift into jargon or lose you, please stop me. She shuffled her hair close... Her hair? Jeepers. She shuffled her chair closer to the bed and began. Epigenetics are first mentioned scientifically in the 1940s, but it's only been since the millennium with technological advances that any serious progress has been made. The basic idea of epigenetics is that an environmental factor such as smoking, diet, or trauma can fundamentally alter how your genes express themselves in your daily life. Express themselves? I asked. Sorry. Yes, well, gene expression is the process by which the instructions contained within our DNA are converted into a functional product such as a protein. For example, a poor diet can result in epigenetic aging, meaning your genome doesn't perform as well as it should. This can lead to ill health and an earlier than expected death. It's like a switch, for lack of better description, which gets blown by the trauma, in this case, lots of fast food. This stops a particular protein from being released, which in turn affects the overall health of the individual. Losing me already. During an epigenetic episode, the body reads the DNA instructions differently than if it had not happened. Unlike genetic changes, epigenetic changes we think are reversible. This is all very fascinating, Dr. Jaeger. I'm well aware that I'm overweight and intelligent enough to realize eating badly is a personal choice. I'm fat because I eat too much junk food. Is that why I'm here, due to my weight? I'd realized already that none of the other patients / colleagues were overweight. She shook her head. No. Your weight gain, I suspect, in your case, is due to other traumatic aspects of your life. I'm assuming you weren't always obese? No. I piled weight on after my divorce. I thought there'd be a trigger. Another branch of epigenetics is the supposition that any traumatic event a person suffers throughout their lives lays down a biological marker on their genome. That affects how the genes express themselves. We are particularly interested in how these markers, or switches if you prefer, can be applied to modern psychiatry. We now suspect that many modern and historical mental illnesses can be traced to certain crucial markers on a person's genome. Switches that were blown by a traumatic event. This is a huge oversimplification, but I'll use plain language to allow you to stay with me. For example, a person suffering from bipolar disorder or other cognitive issues, or even having the propensity to become addicted to drugs or fast food, will have a trigger. This trigger can often be traced back to one or a series of emotional trauma suffered at an early age or throughout life. Each of those emotional markers will have left a trace on the genome. Now, there's nothing new in the supposition that a person's life can be adversely affected by trauma. You only need to look at the survivors of atrocities like 9/11 or the Manchester bombing or soldiers returning from war zones to see that. However, the treatment has always been by traditional therapy, which is time-consuming and often ineffective, or by administering drugs that long-term are even less effective. This method, we think, can give almost instant results. If we can target the broken switches on a person's genetic record and switch them back on, for want of a better analogy, it will free up gene expression and thus heal the patient. We focus on the earliest markers first, as the earlier the trauma, the greater effect on a person's personal development. As we get older, we tend to be able to cope with trauma better, due to experience and perspective. It's not always the case, and obviously depends on the scale of the trauma and the resilience of the individual. Doctor Janice said something about this morning. Good. I expect you've had problems coping with what life has thrown at you. An understatement, if there were one. I tried to understand all of what I'd just been told. I'm not a stupid man, but some of it sounded like science fiction mumbo-jumbo. But mentioning that to the doc probably wasn't a good idea if I wanted to stay on the program. I'd had more lucid conversations with Monty. So, how does this apply to me? The doc smiled. That's the big question, isn't it? And that's the end of the chapter. Quite a peculiar chapter, if you ask me. Not because of the story, but just because that's it. And I guess hindsight will tell us more once we've continued reading, but it makes you wonder, why chapter 4 was merely the introduction to the genome therapy, as we'll call it. I mean, I understand what the doctor was saying. They're gonna go back in time, find the traumatic triggers, and essentially reverse them to see if that helps. The question is, will it work? I don't know. But we have plenty more pages and chapters to find out. Should we do one more chapter? Get through chapter 5, and then next time continue on with, you guessed it, chapter 6. Oh, that reminds me. This Thursday and the following Thursday, I unfortunately will not be able to read. I think what I'm going to do is switch it to Wednesday evening, since it's 2 in a row, and then that way we don't lose out. If it was just the one Thursday and that was it, then not as big of a deal, but considering it's 2 Thursdays in a row, and only reading once a week, that's, you know, for all of you that are faithfully subscribing to me, that is not fair, and I don't want to, you know, take that away from you, basically. I want to give you your subscription's worth, if I can say that successfully. So, after tonight, we'll be live again on Wednesday. And then the following week, again on Wednesday. But then we should be back to normal after that. Unless I learn of other life-altering events. But, so, just a heads up. In case I forgot, which I almost did. So tell your friends. Since I don't have a Discord anymore, I can't announce it on there, but I will throw it on my social medias that will be going live on Wednesday. Alright, in the meantime, take another sip of my tea, and then we'll get into chapter 5. Just turning down the warmer a wee bit. There we go. Yes. Alright, chapter 5 is called What I Go to School For. And this is on page 28 in the book. The doc and Nurse Patton faffed about in the corner preparing 2 syringes. Faff being a well-known medical term. The doc eventually approached me with one of the syringes filled with amber fluid. What's this? I asked the doc. She swabbed my arm. This is our special genomic plasma compound, GPC for short, which will tag and mark the epigenetic episodes that have affected your genome, your gene expression, and possibly your psychological development. It also contains a mild sedative, which will help you drift off. We need you unconscious to measure the results. What happens then? We will target the earliest epigenetic episodes with our special protein compound and see if we can switch any of them back on, and measure its effect on your mental well-being. 2 injections then. The doc smiled. Yep. Super. What's up, dude? How you doing? You're just in time as we start chapter 5. It's our final chapter for the night, though, just as a heads up. But how are you, sir? It's good to see you. Are you doing super duper well? Dude, you're good. That's great. Glad to hear it. Well, welcome in. There's a lovely puzzle, if you're interested. But yeah, glad to see you. You bet your ass I am. Oh yeah. I'm Cooper. And you're going to do this for all my blown switches? If we can, yes. How many blown switches do I have? The doc paused before answering. Your DNA sample shows somewhere in the region of 32. 32 times 2? So potentially 64 injections. The doc nodded. I pushed my head back into the pillow. So you're saying I'll leave here with more holes in me than a 40-year-old dartboard? Nurse Patton eased the amber liquid into my vein, and I slipped into warm darkness with the sound of Doc's laughing echoing in my ears. From the fogginess surrounding my brain, I heard my name being called. I opened my eyes and looked up. Sam Harris, I can see you're here. Were you sleeping? I blinked a few times and shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. Oh, so you weren't sleeping. Kids' laughter rang in my ears. What happened to the doc? Where the hell was I? A stupid question, it being obvious as I looked around. My primary 1 class with Miss McFarlane staring at me. How did I get here? I asked, bewildered. I assume you walked some, like you do every day? Gales of laughter from my classmates. This isn't right, I told Miss McFarlane, who looked 24 years old. She should be retiring soon, not standing there looking pretty. I'd forgotten how beautiful she'd been, or perhaps my 5-year-old brain hadn't appreciated it back then. What's not right? Miss McFarlane asked. The smile had left her face, replaced with concern. She walked over to my desk. I looked down and realized how tiny my hands were. My body, too. I'd shrunk. I looked up into Miss McFarlane's soft brown eyes. I'm tiny, I meowed. She smiled at me. I remember her being a kind teacher. Of course you're tiny. You're 5. I'm not. I'm 40. Nearly 41. Everybody roared with laughter again. Even the teacher giggled. Can I just say, Sam, I hope that when I'm 40, I have skin as smooth as yours. Then I realized with a jolt that I must be dreaming. It came as complete relief, and whilst everything felt so real and solid, I postulated that it might be down to the amber junk that had been pumped into me. It must have some hallucinogenic properties. The doc never mentioned that. But maybe she thought it would put me off. I smiled up at Miss McFarlane. This might be fun. A 5-year-old kid with a 40-year-old brain. I bemused. A bemused expression drifted across the teacher's face. She reached down and put her hand on my forehead. You don't feel hot, Sam. Maybe you should go along to the school nurse, just in case. I shook my head. No, I'm fine, honestly. I'm probably just tired. A coffee might perk me up. My teacher scoffed. I'm sure it would, Sam, but all you'll be getting in here is your milk at 11. If you don't need to go to the nurse, then, if you don't mind, I'll get back to teaching the class. Be my guest, I smiled. It's kind of strange, trying to do a voice of a 40-year-old, and then switching to do the same guy, but as a 5-year-old. Okay. Just gonna throw that out there. She shook her head at me and walked back to the front of the classroom, glancing back at me a few times. While she finished reading through the register, I took some time to check out the rest of the classroom. It certainly felt very authentic. My subconscious mind had reconstructed the room in an incredible amount of detail. The blue dragon mural on the wall near the door to the corridor. Every kid in the class had contributed a little bit to it. My effort was near the rear, consisted of some blue scales with the names of my family on them. On the back wall were some poorly drawn pictures of houses, except the one by Beth Graham. Her cozy cottage collage seemed extraordinarily good for a 5-year-old. I remembered Beth now, with brown hair and mousy features, but brilliant at drawing. She moved away to London at the end of her primary 3. I wondered what happened to her. Just to the left of me sat Danny McAdam, who habitually peed himself in class. I wondered if he'd do it today. I looked under his desk. No telltale puddles yet. Then I spotted her. Lucy Lawrence. She sat 2 rows in front, her back to me, but I'd know that dark mane of hair cascading over her shoulders anywhere. I remembered her face so well, too, with a little button nose and lovely red lips that always appeared as if they'd been enhanced with lipstick. But her eyes were her most memorable feature. Eyes of amber, glowing like some otherworldly, ethereal creature, not of this earth. I'd never seen eyes that color before, and never would again. I suppose she'd been my first crush, but I wouldn't have known what those feelings were back then. But strangely, I could feel it now, a vague longing within my tiny, immature body. I wondered when she and I had a play date. Miss McFarlane finished her registration and handed out photocopied pages from a book called Ben the Badger. I don't remember things being so bad that we didn't get real books back then, but I needed to remember this was a dream, and my subconscious wouldn't get everything right. Now, class, Miss McFarlane announced. I'm going to read the first few pages. Try to keep up if you can. Then I'll work with you on the tricky words. This seemed a bit much for a primary 1 class to cope with. I wondered about the date. I put my hand in my pocket to pull up my mobile, but of course, these were different times, before mobiles took over the world. Anyone who owned a mobile phone would be pulling it out on a trolley. A trolley is a shopping cart, by the way. No watch on my wrist either. Thankfully, the teacher had written the date on Tuesday, 17th of March, on the whiteboard. That meant I'd been in school for nearly 6 months. I smiled as the usual suspects raised their arms. Beth, of course, and another girl from the posh estate whose name escaped me. I never understood why her parents didn't send her to private school. They were loaded, and of course, Susan with the unironed uniform way too small for her. Always untidy, dirty looking, and a little smelly. Her mum had mental health issues. Not that I knew that then, but with my 40-year-old brain engaged, I could see the reality now. Poor lamb. The stick she got from the other kids, me included, I remembered with shame. Given the treatment I'd been subjected to, you'd have thought I've known better, but I didn't. Kids didn't, or don't realize. Miss McFarlane ignored the raised hands and said, "Sam, how about you?" I glanced up from my musing. "About me what?" Laughter from the kids and a smile from the teacher. At least I was amusing everyone today. "How about you read page 3 to everyone?" I shrugged. "Yeah, okay." Miss McFarlane cocked her head to the left, puzzled. Benji, my dog, used to do that. I hated reading to the class back in the day, as I wasn't a very good reader, which is why I used to get picked, of course. I shouldn't have any problems today. I pulled the photocopied sheets of grainy paper towards me, selected page 3, and began to read. Ben likes his bed. His bed is soft, like him. Ben likes his bed. Miss McFarlane stared at me with her eyebrows raised. "Well done, Sam. You made that sound easy." It had been easy for a 40-year-old who'd been reading for a long time. Excuse me. I didn't say that, though, as that would spoil the rest of the dream. "Now, can anyone tell me any interesting facts about badges?" the teacher asked. The usual hands shot up. "Beth?" Miss McFarlane said. Beth beamed. "Badges only come out at night." "That's right," said the teacher. "Badgers are nocturnal." Miss McFarlane gazed around the classroom. "Who else can tell me something interesting about badgers?" "Sam?" she said, fixing her eyes on me. "What do you know about badgers?" I paused for a moment, but in the end I couldn't resist. "They've got very smelly arses, miss." And that's chapter 5. So Sam finds himself injected. At first, very confused about his surroundings when he kind of comes to, only to realize that he's essentially reliving what it was like to be 5. Thank you. Thank you. The interesting thing to me, though, is that he's still got his current knowledge level. I had wondered, because I kind of figured they'd be going back in time with this whole drug thing, and that when he was waking up, he wasn't, just there at the institution. But I had been curious if he was just going to go back to literally being 5 and having the mind of a 5-year-old. But maybe realizing it was like deja vu. Or, in this case, going back to being 5, but clearly aware of everything. And I'm kind of glad it's the latter, because I think it makes more sense with the storyline and being able to, quote, fix the switches, as they're calling them. So yeah, pretty interesting so far. We're Somehow a hair was there. We're only 34 pages in. I'm quite curious to see where this is going to go. I hate to skip the discussion, but I need to get to bed. No worries, Kay. We are wrapping up. We are wrapping up. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a great night's sleep. And as I said before, we'll be back on Wednesday. Not Thursday. Wednesday. Because Thursday, I won't be here. Gone. Like magic. Here's hoping I remember. I will try and send you a message if I remember. But have a good start to your week. I hope things go okay. Right. In the meantime, I need to find someone to raid. And I think I know where we're going to go. Because if you remember my friends Here There Be Monsters, Mercy and Pixie, Pixie is celebrating her birthday. And what better way to say happy birthday than to swing by with a raid? So, if you join me for that, I would be very grateful. Feel free to use the raid message if you would like. Let me just copy that myself. Thank you for hanging out. I hope you're enjoying this new book that we just got into. We'll be back Wednesday to keep it going. But until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have an amazing night.